Hey, this is episode 2 of whatever. I think I fixed the audio issues, but if I didn't, I'm sure somebody will tell me. So, the topic today I want to talk about is it's about analysis and narrative. So, basically, I feel like I have a very different idea of what those two concepts mean. And what I mean by that is if you watch any of the Valve profiles from any of the majors, Dota 2 or CS:GO, or a lot of these esports documentaries, a lot of them focus too much on narrative. And the reason I think that's a problem is because I have a like the general view of analysis and narrative is that they're two different things, whereas I actually think of them as the same thing. And what I mean by that is the analysis, or like how you play the game, what the analysis of all that stuff is, in a sense, the narrative. Because if all right, so I guess I'll break it down since I'm pretty sure I'm being unclear. The whole point of a narrative is to tell a person or tell a viewer why why you should care about this person, what makes them special, what makes them unique, what makes them exceptional. And in that sense, I think analysis does the best job of showing us who a person is in the game. And that aspect of them is, I think, in many ways, the single most important personality aspect of any player in any competitive game. And the reason for that is you can talk about all the rest of the crap if you want to. How nobody liked them when they were young, how they're bullied, or how their parents didn't want them to go into esports or whatever. But the critical part for me is if you want to break down their daily lives, I think most of them spend most of their time thinking about or playing the game, or if not thinking about or playing the game, thinking about winning, competing, and that becomes the critical personality trait and driving force behind all they do or all they want to do. And I think that's kind of what's missing is analysis. A lot of people think of analysis kind of dry or boring. I don't really think of that. So generally, if you, how do I explain this? Generally, I think the way a player plays, the better they get, or perhaps not even the better they get, like the more time they spend on their craft, the more time they spend on their art, the more their personality will shine through, assuming the game is good enough. So, assuming like the game is strong enough, eventually you will see these like very idiosyncratic aspects to their play where it almost feels like they are living their life. It almost feels as if their life is reflecting onto their game, and in return, their game is reflecting onto their life. So that's why I think a lot of these like Valve profiles aren't particularly good, because a lot of the people they choose, they could easily go this route, but it's a bit harder to. I guess it's a bit harder to do because it's harder to write, or it might just be the case they don't have enough time, or they don't have enough money, or they don't have enough people. So I'm just putting it out there. So what I mean by I'll give some examples, I guess. So in StarCraft 2, famously, I flamed Blizzard after BlizzCon 2013 with this series called. It was only a two-part series, but it was called "The Greatest Story Never Told." And the first part was about SOS, because for those who don't know, that year in BlizzCon 2013, they didn't stream the main stage, half the playoff bracket on the main stage. So by the time they got to the finals, nobody who was there knew who SOS was or saw any of his games leading up to that point. Neither did the casters, because the casters were all busy doing the main stage game stuff and doing a bunch of other stuff. So maybe one or two of them might have seen his games earlier, but it's kind of like he didn't really build into the main story arc, which was about Jaedong that year. So a lot of them had really no clue, and then like they had to sensationalize a bunch of stuff like SOS was revolutionizing all of Protoss play and stuff like that. The other guy I want to talk about though is DuckDuck, who didn't see any games played on the main stage, and for whatever like cosmic reason, this has been his entire his entire career has basically been thus. So basically, for those who don't know who DuckDuck is, he will never. I don't think he will ever pop up on anybody's top 10 or top 20 players of all time in StarCraft 2. Like, if you asked a random guy to name, like, their top 10 Protoss players or their favorite top 10, I don't think he'd even crack that. Like, he's not very famous. He wasn't particularly great, but he did have a very, like, symbolic story about him because there was always this story about the faceless Korean. Like, oh, in StarCraft 2, it's like, oh, faceless Korean. Those Koreans are so boring. They lack personality. Nobody really cares about them. They're not like the best Koreans, and they don't have like that special regional connection with us, like the Europeans or like the Americans or whatever, right? So the funny thing about DuckDuck is he spent his entire like career kind of like fighting this persona by accident because he was a very he was a very like all inish sort of player. So like the aspect of him was even worse because not only was he not a skilled Korean, but like the games he played were generally very bad, like very desperate. But that's kind of I was kind of like the point of his career. It's like this was this guy who wanted to win, who wanted to play, who wanted to compete, but he had such like a desperate struggle to get anywhere. Like the first team he ever joined was Wera, and that was famously where the molestation scandal happened, where like the coach found out to be molesting a bunch of like the players on the team, so that's why they broke up. And then DuckDuck spent years just like wallowing around in Code A, or maybe if he had a very good run, he make it to Code S, or sometimes on an online league he might qualify for like NASL, but like he never really penetrated like the minds of the general public until he went to WCSEU. And then when he went to WCSEU, there's like he when he tried to qualify online, there were like a bunch of people like, who is this guy? Just a Code B player, just another faceless Korean. But he eventually did win. And then I think it was Red Eye. Yeah, Red Eye asked him like after he won like what this meant to him, and then he just kind of broke down in tears because you have to understand like that was like a 4 year run for DuckDuck where he literally had lost, like he basically sacrificed so much of his time, so much of his effort just to get this one win. So even though it wasn't like the greatest win in the world, like because obviously I think the greatest win would be something like a GSL or a BlizzCon or like one of those super high prestige tournaments, it was still a very good win. And for DuckDuck, that kind of meant everything. And and that desperate struggle to get anywhere was like it just kept showing up in his games. Like he was such an all in sort of player where he's like it almost felt like he knew he was bad, like relative to like the other top players. Like he knew like if he played like a straight up game against like a Innovation or a Maru, or like if he played a normal game against like even like the best European players, like his chances would be lower. So it always felt like he was all in. It always felt like he was desperate. It always felt like he was like scrapping his way, and that's just for like that one singular moment, right? So you go into BlizzCon 2013, and obviously Blizzard's like, this guy's a faceless Korean. We don't really need him on our main stage games. We don't have the time or whatever. So all of his games relegated to the back, and so he had to play against Innovation in the first round. Innovation was like how do I say this? He was the most hyped Terran player of that year. I think going into BlizzCon, well, I don't think he was the best. I think he was the third best after Maru and Tasia, and he really should. This was like a huge over under where I think almost everybody should have picked Innovation to win that off of just like what you knew about the two players alone. But what DuckDuck did was he did this like he did a bunch of all ins to get past Innovation. Like in the first like 4 games, I think he just kept going all in, all in, all in, all in, and it went 2-2. And then the fifth game was when he did like the reverse all in, or I guess it wouldn't be the reverse, it'd be like a different type of all in. So the first 4 all-ins are all Blink Stalker, like attack very fast, get him before anything goes up, that kind of style. And then what he did in the third game was he went for like the super gritty all-in, where he betted all that Innovation would play super safe. He'd play because this is like a deciding game, so he'd just bunker down, hold in his base, and then wait out the eventual like DuckDuck Blink Stalker all in. What DuckDuck did instead was he went for a very fast triple nexus, built up his economy super fast, and then hit a timing, and then even then, like innovation almost out executed DuckDuck just off of pure like mechanics. But DuckDuck did eventually win, so it became one of the biggest upsets of the entire year. But unfortunately for DuckDuck, or coincidentally, like it figures into his like overall overarching story, I guess, is like he gets this huge upset against one of the best players of the year, considered by many the best player of the year, but it was on the backstage, so he didn't really get any of the props or any of the praise he was hoping for, like any of that like public admiration he was like fighting so hard for the entire time. And then he goes against Mario, and then nearly does the same thing as Mario, but loses out in the fifth game. So that's kind of in terms of like emotional like stories that like kind of mirror like his personal gameplay. That one was very high up there, but I understand why Blizzard themselves would probably never use this line of thinking, because that they'd have to admit that they fucked up that year, and I don't think they ever will. Another player that comes to mind that Blizzard will never talk about would be somebody like Life, obviously because he's banned for the match fixing and stuff. But there's like a like the way he did everything, the way he dealt with life itself was very laissez-faire. It felt like he was gambling all the time, but it was working out, so he just kept doing it. And the reason it worked out particularly in the game is because he understood. He had this very strong instinct, I guess. That's the best way to put it. He had this very strong instinct to know when the other guy was afraid or the other guy was going to fuck up. Or there were times where he could create circumstances where he could force them to fuck up. So, like, the best way to do it is to control the eyes of the opponent in StarCraft 2. So the best way to do that is you would attack one area, and then in a completely different area he would sneak in a bunch of lings. And because he had read the map, or because he was like Zerging super aggressive, he knew a lot of the information that other people wouldn't have, so he could sneak in and do these surprise attacks. And then all of a sudden, like when the red lights go alert, the other player will force his attention back to the other area, and Life would instantly know that the other guy's attention was focused in a different area, and then that's when he would attack on the main army and then win the game. Something like it was a very like Life's like gambling spirit, kind of like that kind of super instinctive, super aggressive. I do what I want. I don't care about the consequences. I feel no pressure. I don't give a fuck kind of attitude was basically why he was one of the all-time greats and why he transcended that game. But it might also be why he ended up match fixing, because he had that kind of attitude where he didn't really give a fuck. It's hard to say, because nobody ever did an interview with Life post the match fix, and we only have rumors that he was like a gambling addict. So I mean, it's a very interesting sort of story, but it's another one where I think nobody will ever pick up again, because Blizzard wants nothing to do with him, Kesma wants nothing to do with him, Korea wants nothing to do with him. So the only people that might be interested in it like can't do it, and there's really no audience for it, I guess. So two more examples, I guess, before I close this one out. Another one is one of my favorites is from Dota 2 is Eternal Envy, because here's this guy who he literally thinks his life is an anime, like you know those formative years where like you're learning about math, science, philosophy, history, all that stuff, and every once in a while you might read something, you might watch something, or you might like hear about something where like it changes your life and changes like the perception of your entire life. I feel like Eternal Envy did that, but it was with anime, and it was like some kind of random sports anime. I don't know which one it was, but basically he thought to himself, I want to be the very best that there ever was. Maybe it was Pokemon. Maybe that's what it was. So Eternal Envy, like his entire like play style is very much this. I will push the very edges of what is possible, and I will go farther than anyone can. But because I'm trying to like push the very limits of what I can do, I will always fuck up. Like he's accepted for whatever reason. Like this is how, like in order to become the best, he has to push farther, and so he's accepted this risk of fucking up. So that's why you get all these like pseudo throws and pseudo brilliant plays from Eternal Envy all the time, because he will do things nobody can really imagine he can do, and he will do things, and these things can either be brilliant plays or they can be complete clown fests, depending on how far he pushes like genius or his like clowniness. It's a like you'd have to watch it for yourself. But Eternal Envy is the kind of guy where like you could write an article, you could like do a documentary about this guy, but none of it would be ever be as interesting as just watching him play in a game. That's what I'll say about him. And then the final guy would be Simple. Yeah, Simple from CS:GO. He's a player who has incredible talent, like once in a generation sort of talent. Like in the world today, I can only think of like three guys I feel can match that level of talent, and among the three, I only think like two of them like can match his dedication. So Simple as a person is super. He is like the he is the craziest. He is the okay. How do I explain this? He is super competitive in both senses of like the word of like good of like the good nature of competition and the bad nature competition, where basically you get these guys where where they realize at some point in their life, early on in their lives, they realize at some point, I want to win above all else. Like I don't give a fuck about anything else. In fact, I am so focused on winning. I actually think focusing any extra time on anything else is an inherent waste of time. So like he imagine like Naniwa in like a team game, and then with even greater talent and even perhaps even greater like even greater even like much greater aggression, and you might come up with somebody like Simple, because both of these guys were super competitive. But the difference between like Naniwa and Simple was that Naniwa was playing a 1v1 game and Simple was playing a team game. So it came to a point for Simple where like, yeah, he was incredibly talented. Everybody could see it, but he hadn't proven yet on the highest levels, so nobody really wanted to take the chance, because he was like a very like he was like a very dangerous element where he could accidentally destroy a team, and he either didn't realize or he didn't care. Like it's hard to say. I've never met him. Like or like maybe it's just because he was too young, because like the impulse control is out of control when you're around that age, so you don't really think about the consequences of what you're doing. So Simple was that kind of guy. So Simple was that kind of guy, and you could see it. Like you could see in his gameplay where like he would do the craziest fucking things. Like he would jump out the. Okay, so at I think it was like MLG. Like I think this is a true story, but basically he heard the roar of the crowd like chanting his name when he was playing with Liquid, and because he heard that, he wanted to like prove he was the goddamn greatest. So he jumped out of the window of Mirage and like jumped down two people and like killed them both or something. It was like something really fucking crazy. He does like Simple's mania. Like Simple's like talent is like a super aggression. Like he is a weapon of mass destruction in the server and on his team, and that's why he's like such an interesting sort of figure in CS:GO, and like definitely somebody where I feel like if they ever did like a profile on him, this is like the prime candidate for like mixing the analysis and the narrative, because like his like incredible talent and like hard work and aim and like instinctive game sense and like creativity and all this stuff is like almost directly correlated with all of, like the bad things about him as well, because like all of that shit comes from the same source of like this super hyper competitive spirit. So I think he's a definite example of somebody I hope if they do like a profile about him, they like combine both aspects and like mix them together to make a better overall story. Yeah, I think that's good. Later.